I enjoy teaching this class. I enjoy teaching fiqh. And specifically, today's class is also very important, which is about zakat and so on. So I felt, inshallah, wanted to continue this. And as much as possible, I'll try not to miss this class especially. Okay, all right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulih Nabil Kareem. So last week we spoke about the things that necessitate zakat, or the characteristics that are necessary to be found in an individual to make zakat necessary. So we mentioned 7 different conditions, and I went over them. Just quickly go over them again. One is that a person must be free so that they can own their assets. They must be Muslim. They must be baligh. And I mentioned this in a bit of detail because, for example, sometimes our kids, they have gold. Sometimes they have some investment accounts and so on and so forth. Number 4, they must be baligh, aqil. They must be understanding. Right? So if someone is not, they don't have control over their senses, then they're not required to give zakat. And they must own a full nisab. And we spoke last week about a nisab, and then we adopt the gold nisab here. Who remembers what the grams of gold? How many grams of gold? 87.48. Yes, 87.48 grams of gold, or the cash equivalency, makes you eligible to receive zakat. Amr Bhai remembers because he googled it. When you take notes, or when you write things down, or when you search something, then it keeps it fresh in your mind. So it's good to take notes. Anyways, so you own the full nisab amount or the cash equivalency. So cash equivalency of about of 87.48 grams of gold is about $7,500. Right? That's that. And then they have milkan tamman. They have a full ownership, right? And also wahala alayhi al-hawl, and 1 year goes over that amount. So I mentioned that full ownership and 1 year, meaning that once you have the zakat, once you have that amount of money, then the following year, that date, which is your zakat date, you'll calculate how much assets you have, and you would give 2.5% of that. Any questions on this before we move on?
One question. Is it 87.4, right? You have to give the zakat after that, or?
Yes. Basically, if you have 87.48 grams of gold or more than that, or its cash equivalency, so you have $7,500 or more, after you deduct your debts and liabilities,
Including 7,500 also.
No, separate. So let's say, for example, you only have $10,000, no gold, for example, right? Let's say you're not wearing gold, for example, and you have $10,000, right? In that case, you have to give zakat on $10,000. But let's say you have $5,000 and no other cash, gold, silver, or anything like that, then you would not need to give zakat on $5,000. Okay? Let's say you have no cash. Some women have this, right? They have very less amount of cash, for example. Let's say they only have $1,000 of cash, but they have $20,000 worth of gold. Right? So in that case, they need to give zakat. How will they give zakat? They will have to either liquidate the gold, so either sell some part of the gold and then give zakat, or give zakat from the $1,000 that you have, the cash that you have, or your husband gives it on your behalf. But that's not a requirement. The husband is not required to give it on your behalf. If he chooses to, that's between him and Allah Ta'ala. But one person is not responsible for someone else's zakat. Right? Same thing goes for udhiyah. Same thing goes for all of these things, right? That each person is responsible for their own zakat, their own udhiyah, their own zakatul fitr, sadaqatul fitr, whatever we call it. Each person is responsible for their own. Yes, you can give it on behalf of others. And generally, for example, especially sadaqatul fitr and smaller amounts, generally the father gives it, for example, or something. But zakat, because it's a larger amount, each person is required to pay for their own selves. Okay?
Suppose you have 10,000. Before you reach the anniversary, you lost the 1,000.
Yeah.
So you pay 9,000.
Yeah, you pay on 9,000. So now, okay, I'll give you the full scenario breakdown, okay, because this is important. Everyone must understand these concepts, right? So zakat date is the first date that you reached the nisab amount, meaning whatever the nisab amount is. Right now it's $7,500. So your zakat date is when you reach that amount of money in your savings after deducting debts and liabilities. And actually, I should not say savings, because many people, they think, oh, it must be in the savings account. No, no, no. It's not necessary. It just meaning you have cash. You have that amount of money. So you have $10,000, for example. But most people, as I said, most people do not remember their zakat date. So therefore, each person should select one day, one Islamic day, and every year on that Islamic day, you calculate your assets and you give zakat on that. Okay. So now, for example, my zakat date is, I will always use Ramadan 10 as an example. Okay, just keep this in mind. Ramadan 10 is my zakat date. Ramadan 10 comes, I have $10,000. Next year, Ramadan, right? Ramadan 10 comes, I have 20,000. I must give zakat on $20,000. Everyone understands that? Yes, that's simple, straightforward, right? Next year comes, Ramadan 9, I lose all of my money, and I now have only $4,000. When Ramadan 10 comes, I only have $4,000. In that case, I will not give zakat, right? Okay, next step, right? Ramadan, okay, now Ramadan, let's say Muharram comes, right? So my zakat date remains the same. Ramadan 10, that is my zakat date. I will calculate my assets on Ramadan 10, every year on that one day. Now, let's say Ramadan 9, someone gifts me $1 million. Let's make it realistic, right? Someone gives me $10,000, right? So Ramadan 9, I had 20,000. Ramadan 10, I now have 30,000. So because on Ramadan 10, I have 30,000, I must give zakat on 30,000. Doesn't matter if that money, I got it yesterday or got it 6 months ago, or I got it Ramadan 11. Does not matter, right? But let's say Ramadan 11, I get $10,000, and I had $20,000 on Ramadan 10. So I will give zakat on 20,000, not on 30,000, because the 10,000 I got after my zakat date. Okay. At any questions?
When you say asset means the gold, house.
No, no. Assets are only cash, gold, silver. Cash, gold, silver. These are your assets. I will explain about house and all of these other things, inshallah. I will explain. But cash, gold, silver. It's very simple. There's also merchandise. Number 4 is merchandise, like things that you sell. But this is very complicated, so I will not explain it for everybody. If someone is a businessman, then you can speak to me and I'll speak separately, inshallah. But just to summarize, just to give you a summary, because you are a businessman, you have to take there are different opinions as to what value you must give zakat on merchandise. Whatever you are selling, you must give zakat on that. How do you give zakat? You don't take the purchase price or the sale price. You take the market value. If you are, or you can take two values. One is the market value of this thing, right? What's generally the estimated amount for this? Or you can take the full amount. Let's say you take your entire warehouse, the full warehouse. If you were to sell it, how much would you sell your full warehouse, all of the stock inside? How much would you sell it for? So you take that number and you give zakat on that number as well. Okay, so let's say, for example, you have $100,000 worth of assets in your warehouse. That's your assets. So you must give 2.5% of that as well. Okay, along with cash, gold, silver. So most people don't have merchandise. So I will focus on these three. But those who have merchandise, you must consider either as like the whole. If you were to sell all of it, how much would you have? Or if you were to sell each piece, in the like the general market value, maybe you bought it for less, and maybe you'll sell it for more, right? But the average market value, you'll give zakat on that one. Okay, does that make sense? Yes. Okay. Ji.
When we say a debt, how to consider what is debt, like mortgage or loan or whatever?
So that's my next. I didn't cover debt yet. I'm gonna cover that today, inshallah. Any other questions before we move on? وَلَيْسَ عَلَى صَبِيٍّ وَلَا مَجْنُونٍ وَلَا مُكَاتِبٍ zakat. Children, those who are mentally unstable, and those who are slaves, they don't need to give zakat. Okay? So your child, let's say your daughter has a lot of gold, for example. Let's say your child has a investment account. Your child does not need to give zakat. But I will talk about investment accounts. Put a pause on investments. I will speak about investment accounts later, inshallah. Today we'll talk about debts. وَمَنْ كَانَ عَلَيْهِ دَيْنٌ مُحِيطٌ بِمَالِهِ فَلَا زَكَاةَ عَلَيْهِ. Right? If someone has, we'll read the Arabic first, then I will explain today's circumstances. Right? So the one who has a debt which encompasses all of their wealth, then no zakat. For example, someone has $10,000. Right? Ramadan 10, they have $10,000. But they owe someone else $12,000. Right? So that means that that debt is more than their assets. So therefore, no zakat. Okay? This is clear? Okay. I will talk about commercial and all those debts coming, but not yet. وَإِنْ كَانَ مَالُهُ أَكْثَرَ مِنَ الدَّيْنِ زَكَّ الْفَاضِلَ إِذَا بَلَغَ نِصَابًا. If his wealth is more than the debt, then he will give the remaining if it reaches nisab. Now, two scenarios. One is that, okay, he owns 10,000, but he owes someone $1,000. In that case, you will deduct. From 10,000, you deduct 1,000, 9,000 remaining, you'll give zakat on 9,000. Okay? Second scenario. Let's say you have 10,000, but you owe 5,000. So now you deduct 10,000 minus 5,000, you have 5,000 remaining. So that does not reach nisab amount, which is 7,500. So you do not need to give zakat. Okay? Yes.
You have to make that transaction, the $5,000 that I owe to that person, in order to qualify, validate that. Do I have to pay that money?
No, you don't need to pay that money. You don't need to pay that money, right?
Just calculate.
Just calculate it.
Even though within that year I did not pay, still I don't need to pay.
No. Even if you owe that money, like, so I have 10,000, for example, right? And I owe someone $1,000. Now, I can pay him. I am not paying him. So there's a hadith, Rasulullah says, مَطَلُ الْغَنِيِّ ظُلْمٌ. The delaying of someone who has the money but is not paying is dhulm, right? So if you owe someone money, it's dhulm for you to delay it. But whatever reason, you are not giving him. In that case, you will deduct that from your zakat amount because that's not your money. That 1,000 is belonging to someone else. It's not your money.
Okay. And that person,
Yes, good observation. Yes, that because that 1,000 belongs to him, he will calculate that as part of his zakat. Okay. Now there's some explanation on that as well, right? Let's say someone owes you money, right? Someone owes you money. In that case, so long as you have hope of receiving that money, you will calculate it as part of your zakat, right? So long as you have hope of receiving that money back, you will calculate it as part of your zakat. So until you lose hope that this person will not give me this money back, you keep paying zakat on it. That makes sense? So for example, I have $10,000, but I let someone borrow 1,000, and he said he was going to pay me 6 months ago. Now he did not pay me 6 months ago. 1 year passes, 2 years passes, 3 years, 5 years pass, and finally I'm like, you know what, this guy is not going to pay. So then for 5 years I will continue to pay zakat on that $1,000, and then once I lose hope of getting that money back, then I don't give the zakat. Now after losing hope, next year he gives it back, right? Then you don't have to backdate though. Like, okay, let's say 1 year I did not pay because I lost hope, so I did not pay 1 year, right? You don't have to backdate because you had lost hope for that time. So let's say 10 years pass, and then 10 years later he gives me that money, so I don't need to pay zakat for on that 1,000 for 10 years because I will not go back. I will not backdate for that amount. Okay. So long as you have hope, then you will pay zakat on it. Okay. Now let's talk about. I think this is all the time that we'll have today. Just talk about debts. So now debts. You have two types of debts. One is commercial debt. One is personal debt. Personal debt, you can deduct it, right? So for example, let's say I will use vague names. I don't want people to get upset, right? Abdullah owes Abdul Rahman $1,000, right? In that case, Abdullah will deduct that 1,000 from his zakat amount. So for example, he has 10,000, he will deduct 1,000 because it's personal debt. Now, let's say Abdullah, generally personal debts generally are not that much, right? Generally, it's like short term, it's a smaller amount, 1,000, a couple $1,000 maximum. Generally, it's not like 100, 200, 300,000, 300,000. Generally, it's not like that, right? Generally, it's a smaller amount. Now, so in terms of like personal debts, you will deduct, you'll deduct. It's also known as short-term debt, personal or short-term debt. In that case, you will deduct the full amount. All right. Then you have the commercial debt. Commercial debt is, for example, house, car, and so on and so forth, right? Those are commercial debts. In that case, yes, you can deduct your commercial debt, but the scholars, they say that, for example, we live in a time that the commercial debts are so high, right? People are owing hundreds of thousands of dollars for 30 years of their lives, or many years of their life, right? So therefore, if you say that someone does not need to pay zakat for 30 years, who's going to remain? Right? Let's be honest, right? Which one of us, don't raise your hand, I'm just saying that, which one of us does not owe house mortgage or something like that? Very, very, very few. Right? Most people, they owe money on a house, right? So therefore, they are in debt, but this is a commercial debt. And by the way, we are assuming that this is a halal Islamic financing. We're assuming, right? Like, for example, UIF. We're just assuming that you are, I'm not going to get into the other housing aspects of it. But for example, UIF is a Sharia compliant avenue, and that is a Sharia compliant company to invest, and they have a different method of purchasing the house and so on and so forth. Anyways, that being said, now for the long-term debts or the commercial debts, what's known as, the scholars, they say you can deduct, some scholars, they say you can deduct up to 1 year worth of payments. Other scholars, they say, no, you should only deduct 1 month. So both options are there, that you can deduct up to 1 year. According to some narrations, some opinions, is you should only deduct 1 month. Now, my opinion or my offer or what I believe, right, you should do is that if you owe, if your Islam, or if your financing amount or the debt you owe for the house monthly is a large amount, and if you deduct 12 months, you'll have no zakat, for example. Let's say, assuming random numbers, let's say your monthly payment is $5,000, for example, monthly $5,000. Now, if you deduct 12 months, that's $60,000. Right? If you only have like 60, 70,000, let's say you have $70,000, right? For example, right? If you deduct 60,000, you only have a small amount of money left to give in zakat. So in that case, the scholars, they say that you should deduct only 1 month. But if you have like $300,000, $400,000, right? Then to deduct 60,000 is not such a big deal, right? Because it deducts a little bit, but you still have a good amount of money to give zakat from. Right? What is the objective? The objective, and we have to understand this from the Islamic standpoint, right? The objective of zakat is not to avoid zakat. The objective of zakat is to give zakat. Right? Because you are fulfilling the command of Allah Ta'ala. You are giving and you are cleaning the rest of your money. So it's not like taxes, right? Taxes, you look for every legal loophole to avoid paying taxes. Yes? Yes. You look for every legal loophole to avoid paying taxes. But zakat should not be like this. Zakat, we should not look for loopholes to avoid paying zakat, but rather we should pay zakat.
So what is amount 100,000? Is it a liability?
What do you mean? Like the yearly mortgage?
Person has 100,000 liabilities
Yes.
as a mortgage.
Yes.
He has 30,000 cash.
Yes.
But if he pay 30,000, then it comes to liability 70,000.
Yes.
With this 30,000, he has a cash, but his mortgage liability is 100,000.
Yeah.
So is 100,000 considered to be his liabilities?
So that's what I'm saying. That's the entire what I'm saying, right? That let's take his scenario, right? Like someone owes $100,000 for a house. They have $30,000 cash, right? Now, this is happening for many years, right? Let's say the house price was 500,000, for example. Over 25 years, they paid off 400,000, for example. right? Or 20 years, let's say they paid off 400,000. Now they have 100,000 remaining. If we say that you can deduct the full amount, which is technically supposed to be true, technically you are right, that yes, the full amount is your liability, is your debt, right? But if you deduct the full amount, no one will give zakat. So that would defeat the purpose of zakat. So to save zakat, the scholars, they say that you must still give, but you can only deduct either 1 month or up to 12 months maximum. Generally, the scholars say you should only deduct 1 month or maybe maximum 12 months, right, of your full assets. So for example, let's say you owe $100,000, right? But your monthly payment is 3,000, for example, right? So that case, you deduct 36,000 from your 30,000, if you have, meaning according to that opinion, the 12 months, right? But if you only have 30,000, you should only deduct 1 month.
The guy paying his mortgage.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Still he has a saving of
Yes,
30,000.
yes.
So we have to consider this 30,000 good faith
Yes,
is considered as a zakat.
yes.
Not we
Yes.
cannot deduct that much.
So the best is not to deduct anything. That's the best. Don't deduct your mortgage because you're paying monthly, you're paying it, mashallah, you're paying it. So give 2.5% of your 30,000. But scholars, they say you can deduct 1 month, right? You deduct 3,000, for example, and you have 27,000, give zakat on 27,000. Right? Yes.
If they don't look at money for the project budget, they will never get extra money.
Yeah.
This big one.
That's fine. So again, zakat is not like tax.
Yeah.
Tax, for example, if you make 100,000, you have to pay tax on 100,000. Doesn't matter. So let's say tax. Let's say, for example, December 31st, you made $100,000 within that year. Doesn't matter. IRS, they'll charge you for 100,000, right? From 100,000, you must give whatever percentage, right? You must give it. Zakat is not like that. Zakat, Ramadan 10 comes around. That's your zakat today. And Ramadan 10, you only have $3,000. Even though you made 100,000, but Ramadan 10, you only have 3,000 cash. In that case, you do not need to pay zakat. You do not need to pay zakat. Yes,
A lot of people has 401.
yes. No, I'm going to get into 401k. I will get into it because it's a long conversation. It's a separate conversation and it's a long conversation. I don't want to take too much time. Any other questions? Last question, yes.
So, regarding the money that's going to another person, right?
Yeah.
And let's say person A, I borrowed like $10,000 and supposed to return it. He doesn't have any. So how that person is going to pay the zakat of $10,000 that is given to me?
Okay. Oh, I get it. Okay. So someone loaned you $10,000. That's all the cash he has. He has no more cash. And so in that case, he has two options. If he has no other cash, then he only has one option, right? He will wait until you pay him back. And then once you pay him back, then he'll backdate. He'll backdate. Year one, 2.5% of 10,000 is $25. Oh, $250, sorry. 250. So then he'll give 250, right? Year two, 9,750, 2.5% of that, whatever, 200 something dollars, right? That. Year three, another minus 9,500 minus 2.5%, whatever amount that is, like this. Just however many years he has no other money, he should backdate. He can backdate.
Credit card and other loan also considered like mortgage?
No, credit card, especially if it's like a credit card is generally considered as a short-term loan, personal loan, generally. Generally it's considered as a short-term, meaning you pay it off generally, right? So technically, yes, you can deduct the full amount. But if you're a person who has a lot of credit card debt, you should not deduct all of it. Again, same thing, 1 year, 1 month or 12 months, you should deduct. Let's say, for example, you have $10,000 worth of credit card debts and you're not getting interest. Again, assuming that you're making the minimum amounts, not the minimum monthly, because if you pay minimum, then you'll have interest, right? You're paying the amount whereby you do not have to pay interest, right? You're paying that amount, let's say just above minimum, whatever it is, whatever number it is, right? So then you should deduct either 1 month or up to 12 months you should deduct. but don't deduct the full 10,000, because if you only have $10,000 cash and you deduct the full 10,000 of then no zakat for many years maybe, right? So therefore, yes, technically you should deduct your credit card debts, but even if you do not, that's fine, and if you do, it's fine also. Any other questions? Last questions? Okay, all right. We will continue on with this. There's a lot more to talk about, and I will get into 401ks. I will get into houses. Someone asked about houses. I'll get into all of cars. I'll get into all of these things. I'll get into crypto as well, inshallah. I will go into a lot of details as well, inshallah. So there's a lot more to talk about. Come by next Sunday, inshallah. And